We get started, a couple of things. I had to message somebody to see if I could get permission. There are some exciting things happening, and there are some painful things happening. And I want to mention, too, if y'all would continue to pray for Houston and Joy, and Houston the third, as Houston Sr. passed away here at about a week and a half, 2 weeks ago. Continue to pray for their family, and then also Tracy, whom many of you know, has been caring for Miss Barbara, Lynn's mother, for a very long time, and Miss Barbara passed away Friday evening. And so that funeral will be here this Tuesday at 2 p.m. for any who might be interested. So show some love there. In the midst of that, too, we have 2 engagements that we're celebrating, which is exciting. We have a grandbaby on the way. Barry and Martha are having a granddaughter. Not a daughter, a granddaughter. Right? Okay, just to be clear. All right, grandchildren. Also, Kyle and Katie have a baby on the way. They're not here. Luke's not feeling good. They have a baby on the way. And then we have some new members joining us in the next few weeks as well. So that's exciting. So it's a good day. I changed things up today, and let me tell you how this kind of came about. I knew that the message this week was in Matthew chapter 5, and it was specifically on, I did not come to abolish the law. And I began to process and think about that, and putting the details. Saturday is kind of the day I put all the details together. I woke up, and I was supposed to start putting the details together, and I said, I'm just going to go out into the garden for just a minute. Okay? Just a minute. And after a few minutes, a lot of minutes, I told you that I said, I've got to go back in and start getting this together and kind of getting ready for tomorrow. She said, why don't you just stay in the garden and talk about the lessons you've learned this year gardening? And I said, that sounds like a really good idea. I listened to my wife. That was the good idea. That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. I'm learning. Katie just gave me permission to announce that. It's a good thing. So I thought that is a great idea. Not only can I go back out into the garden to find inspiration, but I genuinely have been learning quite the lessons here recently. So I have my props up here today. I know that this says that these are for sale. I'm not up here to try to get you to buy plants from Julie and myself. However, if you do want to, they're $5 a piece and 3 for $12. But anyways, this is just up here for a prop. And you're going to hear a bunch of lessons that I have learned this year gardening. Some of them are quite personal. Would you stand with me for just a moment as we read God's Word? Matthew chapter 6, it's still in Matthew, calm down. Matthew chapter 6, verse 28. And why are you so anxious about clothing? Consider the lilies of the field, how they grow. They don't toil, nor do they spin. And yet I tell you, even Solomon in all his glory was not arrayed like one of these. The word of God for the people of God, and if you would say together with me, thanks be to God. You may be seated. All right, here we go. Some of these are personal. Some of these will make sense. Some of them have to do with the mission of the church. Some of them have to do with our personal lives. I think you'll pick up on through them. Let me give you the first. The first category of lessons that I have learned from gardening this year have to do with lessons that have to do with time. Lessons that have to do with time. Here's the first one. Intimacy with one's environment is essential for successful gardening. Intimacy with one's environment is essential for successful gardening. And this takes time. You know, the first year that Julie and I moved here, we did not garden. We used to garden a lot. Back in our 20s, we had like 6 acres of land, and we had this big, beautiful place, and we had a huge garden, and we spent years cultivating it. We eventually moved, and then we were never in a place where we could have a garden again. And then we moved here. And that first year, we decided how if we were going to plant a garden exactly how we were going to lay it out. And we were going to put the tomatoes here, and Julie was going to do this thing here, and I was going to put some blueberry bushes here, and that's how we were going to do it. And because the sun is right here, right? The sun is right here. And then fall comes around, and you know what I realized? The sun's over here. All right, the sun's over here, so we're going to put them here, and then like the next year is year 2, and I'm like, all right, the sun's over here. The sun's over here. And here's what, and this is genuine. I wasn't like, let me think of some really good lessons so I don't have to prepare for preaching. These are things genuinely I've been thinking about. This one particularly, since we moved here, it occurred to me, when you're not in a place long enough to become intimate with the environment, you don't know your environment and you cannot plan accordingly. If you decide to go out and plant your garden, but you don't know where north is and south and where the sun's going to be over the seasons, you're going to have a pretty messed up garden. It's not going to get the sun that it ought to. It's not going to get the shade that it ought to. You're going to miss the seasons. You're going to think, look how much sunlight we have when there are no leaves on the tree. And then the leaves come. And then you think to yourself, you're like, well, trees lose their leaves in the fall unless you have 300 oak trees, like we do. In which case, they lose leaves all year long, which means you get to rake them up all year. That covers, you see what I'm saying? Like, you got to be in a place long enough and intimate enough to where you know your place. And that takes time. I'm surprised how often ministries become like that first year gardening. We don't know where the sun is. We don't know how the seasons operate. We're not familiar with the weather or what grows good in this soil, and we just go. And then when the garden's not successful, what do? We're done. That was the first one. Secondly, knowing what works and what to lean into. One of the things I messaged Tim and Mary yesterday, because there's this huge, beautiful 7-8 foot tall blueberry bush by 6 feet that produces the most gorgeous blueberries. And when we moved here, there were already 3 little tiny scraggly blueberry bushes planted in the corner of our yard. And when we moved here, we saw those blueberry bushes. They didn't look very beautiful at the time. These had been planted by Miss Mary. And now, years later, they produce these huge, beautiful blueberries. And we've done nothing really for them. And I messaged them yesterday and I said, I want to give you a rooting of this tree that you planted years ago, because I want you to see the fruit of your labor. And what occurred to me is, Julie and I, we've planted all kinds of things. But what we noticed about the land that we're particularly on with the parsonage is that it is very good, sandy, loamy, is that how you say that? Loamy soil, is that right? Did I say that right? So it's really good for things like blueberries and grapes. But you know what? Had we come in and just decided, here's what I want to grow, it wouldn't have worked that way. But over time, we've seen that it's really good with blueberries, strawberries, which means other things like grapes and muscadine. You got to learn what works in the environment you're in, and that only comes from time, knowing your environment. Planting fruit trees is a long game, not a short game. You know, you can plant peppers in that same year. You're going to see peppers. You're going to uproot them, and you can plant the next season's crops. But if you're planting fruit trees that are going to produce fruit for 50 years, it's a long game. And that means certain things. Roots before fruits. I came up with that. You're welcome. Thank you. Roots before fruits. So what we have here is a dwarf mulberry. Now, if you don't know what a mulberry is like a blackberry, but it's really big and juicy and seedless, and it grows on a tree instead of a vine. So this is a dwarf mulberry tree that we got out of Charlotte, and this is a dwarf pomegranate. So this grows pomegranate. So Julie's birthday was Thursday, and so part of her birthday was to go get me some fruit trees. And so we went to Charlotte, and we went to this guy who had this hobby farm on the other side of Charlotte. Super nice guy. It's run on his little own land, kind of right outside the city limits. And he's touring us around, and he has a huge blueberry pick'em farm. He actually calls it a somebody else pick'em farm. And so in that blueberry field, he has these incredible blueberries. Like some of them, the blueberries get the size of a quarter when they're ready. And I was like, I want some of those. And so Julie was concerned. She was like, well, Kenny, when Kenny plants a bush, he picks all the berries off. And it's just like you're just taking the life away from the tree. And here's what he said. He said, when we first got our however many hundreds of blueberries, we planted them, and everybody told us you got to prune the berries off. And he says, I thought they don't know what they're talking about. I can make it still produce fruit this year. So they planted them, and then they saw the trees began to die. And last second emergency, they ran out there, and he began just clipping frantically all the fruits off the tree. And you think, well, what's the point then of having a blueberry bush? Within 24 hours, all the trees came back. And here's what he said. He said, listen, he said, if you plant these blueberries and these other fruit trees, we had peach trees with little peaches on them that we planted last week as well. He says, if you don't remove the fruit, here's the thing. The tree is going to do everything it can to produce the fruit, even sacrificing its roots. It's going to pour all its energy into those fruits, and here's what's going to happen. You're going to get some fruits, but before they become ripe, the tree itself is going to die because the roots are not healthy. And I was just like, this makes a really good sermon. Roots before fruits. Sometimes you have to sacrifice fruits. And they look good, you know what I'm saying? Like when you see, he was telling us, he's like, he has all these persimmon trees. And he said, if I have a customer come up and I have a really healthy persimmon tree and a persimmon tree that's not healthy but has little bitty fruits on it, what do you think they're going to buy? The one with fruits on it. Because that's what draws our attention. But he says sometimes you have to sacrifice the fruits in order to get the roots where they need to be so that you can continue to get fruits from that tree for the remainder of its life. Pruning is painful till you see results. This year we had that tree that Mary had planted, and it was looking real scraggly because we hadn't messed with it. You know, it's just like growing stuff all over the place. And it had all these little buds with little blueberries on it. And I told Julie this year, I said, I'm going to have to prune it. And she's like, you can't prune it. It's got all the berries on it. I said, I have to, or it's not going to last very long. And so I took the snippers to it, and I pulled all these branches. And when I pulled all the branches, it looked, did y'all see, anybody see this little tree I pruned months ago? This little thing on the side of it? It looked like a little, I mean, it looked really bad. It looked bad, right? But Jeff Stowe told me, okay, you got to prune it because it's got to do this. So here's Julie. She's going, you're cutting off all the stuff, and we have to save these precious little blueberries. And now that blueberry bush is beautiful. You see, pruning is painful till you see the results. Oh, I have so much more, y'all. Gardening requires sweat equity. Sweat equity. You can pity the weeds, but you cannot leave them. You hear me? You can pity the weeds, but you cannot leave them. Now, let me just say, let me read the second one, then I'll come back and apply this. Old roots cause damage and take up resources. You have to dig them up. You have to. If you don't put in the work to remove weeds and dig up old roots, they will take all the resources for your future growth. I don't even have to spell that one out, do I? We know exactly where this one goes. We spend time feeling sorry for those roots that are no longer producing life instead of digging them up and putting them in the pile. The weeds, we just don't have time, but we have to get them out. Not everything that looks dead is dead. We had this lemon tree that was given to us by Victoria. Most people here know Victoria. She was our neighbor who sold her house and then moved. Victoria gave us a lemon tree. That lemon tree was very pretty till we left it outside, and it died. It looked like it died. All the branches became brittle. They broke off. I walked up to prune the tree, and instead of pruning the tree, it broke, okay? It was dead. And then comes spring this year. And as I'm watching this little pot, this little shoot comes up, and there's life. Now, there's an irony to the story, but here's the thing. Not everything that looks dead is dead. I'm going to tell you, I've spent 2 months of this last semester feeling quite dead. Where's the life within me? Not everything that looks dead is dead. As this little shoot began to produce life, I repotted it and upplanted it and began to nurture it and put life into it. And it became, within a matter of weeks, this huge bush. And as I'm looking at the bush and looking at my lime tree, I'm thinking, this tree really doesn't look like that tree at all, and it's supposed to. So I use my plant identifier, okay, because we're modern now. That's how we do it. I took a picture and it said white ash. And I was like, what? I thought it was a lemon tree. No, it's white ash. Let me tell you what happened. When you grow lemon trees, you don't just plant a seed and the tree comes up. You graft it into a rootstock. And a very common rootstock for growing citrus trees is white ash. So when the fruit tree died, guess what the rootstock sent up? White ash. So I had to throw it away. But still, both things are true. Okay? Sometimes things look dead and they're not dead, and sometimes it's not what you thought it was. Okay? If it's dead, mix it into the compost. That's another lesson. All right. Hardships in the garden. Sometimes you have to sacrifice your efforts and start over. I think that's probably the hardest one. You see, Julie and I have this one raised bed. Last year for her birthday, I built her this incredibly awesome raised bed. And we planted all kinds of things in there last year. It was wonderful. And this year we planted garlic and we planted all things. And so we're getting ready to harvest. And we have 3 raised beds in this system. And 2 of them produce incredibly beautiful plants. But the 3rd one had garlic that we've been waiting on for months. And then we had put sugar snap peas in there. We had also planted carrots in there. We had also planted broccoli in this one raised bed. And we kept watching it, and everything else in our garden was taking off and getting big. And this one raised bed was just weak. And last week I said, Julie, I think we need to dig it up, count our losses, and amend the soil. Whatever's happening, this raised bed is unhealthy. And it is painful when you have put many hours and money into growing a garden that you finally realize isn't working very well. And reluctantly, we dug it all up. It went into the compost pile, and we amended all the soil, cleaned it up, fixed it up, and replanted it. Those are hard moments. Not every effort survives. We were given a deal on a bunch of strawberries. We planted many dozens of strawberries in my planter barrel. 2 of them made it. Not every effort survives. Not every seed planted sprouts. Not everything is in your control. I had planted chicken beds, which means this is a way to feed your chickens without costing you feed. And one day I look up, and all the chickens are in my field areas, which means it's not ready. It's not time to release the chickens. Chickens destroy. I don't know how they got in there, but they got in there. They destroyed everything. Not everything is within your control. Weather in North Carolina is not in your control. You see, there are lots of things, no matter how good of a gardener you are, that aren't in your control. Seeing the fruit of your labor builds endurance. I came home from Julie's birthday buying of my fruit trees on Thursday. And when we showed up, we're pulling all these plants out of the van. And the first thing that Evangeline says, because she's so wise, she's a wise young woman. She says, are we gonna stay here long enough to be able to eat the fruit of these trees? And here's why she said that. We've never lived in a place where we have. We've planted apple trees. We've planted blueberry bushes. We've planted many things that we sell the property and we come back by to visit, and you know what they do with those fruit trees that are a hassle? They cut them down. Seeing the fruit of your labor, though, builds endurance. Here's the personal part. I don't want to move. Doesn't mean I shouldn't. Doesn't mean that won't happen one day. But I am weary of not seeing the fruit. Beauty versus function. I told y'all I got so much. Y'all are so lucky today. Beauty versus function. All right, first of all, you got to decide what you're doing. In a food shortage, beauty is low on the list, isn't it? In a food shortage, beauty is low on the list. You start thinking less about a pretty lawn, and you start thinking a whole lot more about whether or not those carrots are going to produce. In a food surplus, functionality is low on the list. Now, let me say something about those 2 facts, because it applies to the church. When we simply need Jesus, like just give me Jesus and that's what I need, beauty is really low on the list. we start talking a whole lot less about style and culture and what color is the carpet and are they pews or are they chairs. We start thinking a whole lot less about the landscaping when we just need Jesus. And when spirituality is like a buffet in our world, that goes low on the list. And we have time, sometimes wasted time, to spend on asking the wrong questions about our garden. But beauty has its place. Last year, Julie felt guilty. Spent all her plant money on flowers last year. We did plant a garden, but she spent a lot of it on flowers. And she was like, I feel so guilty because I just want like pretty things in the garden. So she's hanging all these flowers up and we have all our garden, but she's putting her money into all these colorful, beautiful flowers. And you know what happened? We didn't expect this. You know what all those beautiful flowers did? They brought pollinators. Never even crossed our minds. We had the best garden last year that we have ever had, because we had so many pollinators who were attracted to the colorful flowers. Beauty has its place. God gave us beauty. God wasn't like, don't worry about what is beautiful, that's dumb. He was never like that. Beauty moves us because it represents who God is. There's nothing wrong with that. All right. This is fake. Fake plants never produce fruit. All right, listen. They also never die. You can always spot a fake plant given enough time because it's not going to produce fruit and it's not going to go away. Feel free to clap. I don't even have to tell you what that means. Don't be a fake plant. If you are fake, you will never produce fruit and you will never go away. Don't be that. I'm getting close, y'all, but I have so much. Lawns versus permaculture. Have y'all heard this? This is really a recent thing in the current generation. And for those of you who don't know, Charlie, what do you do now? Like, what's your thing?
I work for NC State Center for
Environmental Farming Systems. All right. When I first met Charlie, he's like, why is Christians so opposed to environmentalism? I'm like, I have no idea what's wrong with them, Charlie. I don't know. Christians are lawn people, maybe not permaculture people. I don't know what's wrong with this. Lawns. When your focus is exclusion and efficiency, you have to fight off important biodiversity that threatens the singularity of your efforts. That's a big sentence. Y'all, let me say it again. When your focus is exclusion, I'm going to grow nothing but this. I'm just going to have a real pretty lawn. And my lawn, I'm sorry, y'all, it's parsnip. It's not pretty. I've not put a whole lot into it. If I'm just going to have a pretty, pretty lawn, I got to spray it with things and I got to get the other things away from it, right? And here's what happens. It kills biodiversity in the soil. So soil becomes unhealthy, and so you have to buy certain grass that can grow in unhealthy soil, and then you have to kill off all the things that threaten that unhealthy grass, and it just becomes a cycle of unhealthy lack of biodiversity in your lawn. So there's been this new movement called grow gardens, not lawns. When your focus is exclusion, all I'm going to grow is kale. You have to exclude anything else that impedes upon that. Instead, permaculture embraces diversity in order to fight disease. Listen to me. Diversity in the church is a fight against disease. We have become so efficient in the church. We're efficient. We know how to grow corn. So guess what we're going to do? We're only going to grow corn because we know how to grow corn. And the soil in which all of the health of our gardens depends becomes deficient. And then we find ourselves not able to handle disease at all. That's why we're in such a pickle today, y'all. It's like they're killing off all the chickens in the world. We got a dozen eggs, it's $15. What's wrong with us? Because we focused on efficiency. We put all our ducks in one basket. Is that the right? Okay, whatever. Eggs in a basket. I didn't even, that was not even on purpose, y'all. We put all our eggs in one basket. Got to kill all the chickens now. Diversity is the key to resilience. We young people, I'm still young, y'all. We gonna grow old. You know, when we built that welcome wall, do y'all remember, those of you who were part of that, the conversation we had? We're like, all right, here's what's going to happen now. Let's go ahead and put it into minutes. Pastor Kenny and Pastor Nate, more Pastor Kenny than Pastor Nate, are going to build this wall. And then Pastor Kenny and Reverend, the part that he did, by the light switch, the part that's broken. We going to have grandkids in this church one day. And there's going to be somebody else's grandkids that are going to come to this church and going to be like, that wall looks dumb. Like that worked like in the 2000 teens. I don't know what we call it. I don't know how we do. It worked back then, but guys, it's time. We gotta kind of update the fellowship, the narthex. Why are we calling it the narthex? We got to update the narthex. And my grandkids are going to be like, my daddy, my great-grandpa built that wall, back off. And we had this conversation as a board, and we were like, we better put it into minutes. One day it's going to happen. How are we going to respond? You see, we're not good with diversity. Almost everybody now that I talk to who gets interested in our church, if I sit down and have a conversation, I'm like, tell me why you're here. It's almost always a split list. What I like, what I don't like. And I'm like, good. We're right where we need to be. We're right where we need to be. Our diversity makes it difficult. Diversity, however, is the key. All right. Y'all got all that. Okay, here's a final one. This one's for me. It's been a hard last 3 months. What did I forget? It's been, because I got so much, y'all. It's been a hard 3 months. Man, there was 6 weeks there when I thought I was losing my mind. Genuine. Like, I'm not I was like, Barry walked up to my house one day on a Sunday afternoon, and I was like, did the Lord send you for like intervention? Like, what are you doing here? Okay? Because I literally thought, I'm in such a bad place that I'm waiting for some. I was so tired. Julie and I got in a fight. I mean, it was a godly fight. I mean, she did what not. We got into a fight over how much I was resting, right? Like, I was coming home, and it was like, I'm going to work real hard for like 10 minutes, and then I need kind of an hour to recover. And it got to where I was hiding my naps. I'd have to find a place and be like, and that day Barry comes up, and I was like, I have to sneak around my naps. As the Lord has began to restore me. My reading, I use this app that many of you who are in 13 use, but it's called is it the Olive Tree Bible app? And my reading plan this year, which at first I didn't like, my reading plan, you'd read this section of the Bible, and then it would bring you to something in Jesus' Sermon on the Mount that you'd read every day. So there was this thing that changed every day, so you're reading through the Bible, but then also at the end of that reading, you had the same thing you would read for like 6 weeks in a row. And here was the one that kept coming up in this season of my life. An unhealthy tree cannot produce healthy fruit. An unhealthy tree cannot produce fruit. And I'm reading every day. And for the first time ever, here's what occurred to me. I'm used to reading, where's the fruit? You know what I'm saying? Like, where's the fruit in your life? There's the key. Why aren't you producing fruit? Where's the fruit? Because if you're not producing fruit, says Scripture. It's not me. That's what Scripture says. We'll give you the boot. It's a loving boot, but it's a boot. Where's the fruit? And for the first time, the focus for me was not that there wasn't fruit, but that I was unhealthy. The connection there is not simply that there's not fruit, but that unhealthy trees can't produce it. It's the logic of it. You can't both be unhealthy and think that you're going to produce a harvest. You won't. The focus isn't even whether there's fruit there. The focus is how unhealthy you are. And here I am, super unhealthy for 3 months. And God's like, yeah, read it again. And my focus became not I have to produce fruit, but I got to get healthy. All right, this one's just for Julie. She brought this. I told her to bring me some props, okay? So she was like, well, you need to put this into your lesson. I'm like, do you want to preach? So this is for her. We grew okra last year. We dried them out. And it's fascinating how many seeds they produce. Thousands of seeds. But it takes patience. Would you stand with me? These were all genuine for me. Just thinking about these things. You know, thinking about how many mistakes that I've made from a lack of resilience, thinking things were dead when they weren't, trying to save a garden that couldn't be saved instead of uprooting it, turning it over and changing it, not knowing enough about my environment because I'm not paying attention. I just, it's just one more, okay? Are you the kind of gardener that you're like having a garden would be cool. It'd be neat. It'd be neat. I'm just going to go out and just it'll be neat to have a garden. That person has a really bad garden. You know why? Because it's like having children. You think that'd be cool. Then you have some and you're like, ooh. Here I am. All these children. They're getting older and they cost more. Didn't think about that, Lord. That wasn't in the Psalms. They were just arrows in my quiver. Now they're poking me in my leg. Sometimes mission in church is like a hobby garden. We think it'd be really cool to have a garden, but we don't think about what it takes to do it. May the Lord bless you and all your children and your gardens. Keep you, make his face to shine upon you all the days of your life. Love you. Whatever the Lord ever brings, may we listen to him. I hope, you're at least stuck with me for 2 years because you don't have a choice. I mean, it's in the contract. But I can tell you, I do think we have a problem in our missions. When missions, we think they happen in a year. We think they happen in 2 years. We don't know our environment. We're not committed to the area around us. We have no intimacy with the world around us. And we're just out there making lawns and spraying pesticides. No, I'm just kidding. May the Lord be with you. Bless you. Make his face to shine upon you. Make you fruitful. Take away any fakeness that might be attached to you. Make you healthy so that you can produce fruit all the days of your life. May you be patient with each other. May you be patient with me. In Jesus' name, amen. You are dismissed. And before you go, was not Pastor Nate's sermon one of the best sermons you have ever heard last week? If you did not listen to it, go back and listen to it. You are dismissed.